Hey everyone, Dan Libert, CEO of NAILBA here. Thank you for joining us for this feature keynote presentation as part of the NAILBA Summer Symposium. This is brought to you by Legal & General America, a big supporter of independent distribution, longtime partner of NAILBA, but we have an exciting session planned for you. First, I want to introduce Jennifer Tornadin, Senior Vice President, Marketing, Distribution, and Strategic Growth for Legal & General America. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And our keynote speaker, Lisa Ling. If you don't already recognize her, let me just give you a few highlights of her background. Lisa is the executive producer and host of This Is Life on CNN. Lisa has been embedded with a notorious biker club and explored medical use of psychedelics and psychotherapy. She's been a field reporter for the Oprah Winfrey Show. She's been a contributor to ABC News Nightline. She has reported from dozens of countries, covering stories about gang rape in Congo, bride burning in India, the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda. I don't even know what that one is, but that just sounds like I want no part of it. And among other issues that candidly are often too Nordic. So we're going to have a real candid discussion with Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Dan and Jen. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so let me tee this up officially, right? I mean, our entire space knows of LIMRA research. In a recent LIMRA study, respondents to a survey indicated that talking about end-of-life planning is more uncomfortable than talking about politics, religion, and even their salary. As industry leaders, or as I like to say, profession leaders, we want to break that perception and build trust with customers, potential customers, really talk about serving underserved markets. In another study that LIMRA conducted, respondents indicated that they believe life insurance to be too expensive than it actually is. We want the uninsured and underinsured to know that life insurance is not a luxury product, that it's available for everyone, it's approachable, and it's the right decision to help protect your family. As we've always said, it is the best gift for loved ones. Today, we will talk about sharing perspectives, building trust, so we can engage the conversation and candidly close the gap on the uninsured and underinsured. So Jennifer, why don't you take it away?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, Lisa, for bringing an outside view into our conversation. We're very excited to speak with you today. Part of what Legal & General, the culture we're trying to build and trying to change within the life insurance market is how do we make life insurance less awkward to talk about, to sort of Dan's point, offering that peace of mind, become more approachable, be viewed as a security, and really give people easy access. So a lot of times people, not only do they think it's too expensive, but it's also perceived as difficult to access. So in our studies, we have over 100 million underinsured or uninsured people in the US, and about 58% of those are women who either don't have enough insurance or who have no life insurance. And so we'd like to have a conversation with you just to figure out how we can create less awkwardness in the industry, talk about it, create more awareness and opportunity for all. So I thought I'd sort of jump into the first question, just because you have such an interesting background in travel and perspective and a lot of real world experiences to bring to this conversation. What is the one thing that you think is common amongst all of the different people you've interviewed across the globe and with your experiences to date?
Well, Jen, it's a great question, and I'm really looking forward to engaging on these topics because I had a pre-interview call with some of the folks from Legal & General, and it compelled me to talk to my own family about life insurance, and it really opened the door to some really interesting conversations and really made me realize how we as a society, as a culture, as a country, really are reactive rather than taking sort of precautionary measures, right? And that applies to so many things in life, not just life or death issues. When you ask about what things we all have in common, irrespective of where we come from, our background, the things that we've experienced. And as Dan sort of read off in my bio, I've had this incredible opportunity to travel the world multiple times over. I have immersed myself in contentious environments where there's conflict all around. I have borne witness to drug activity, to illegal activity, to so many different kinds of worlds that were unfamiliar to me. But what I've realized in both my global travel, but my experiences exploring communities here in America, is that at the end of the day, everyone wants the same things. We all want to feel safe. We all want to be able to provide for our families. We all want to experience happiness. We just may have different methods, right? Or different values at play in an effort to achieve those things. And my fear right now is that we have stopped believing that of one another. You know, we are living amidst such unpredictability. The pandemic that became rooted in this country, but that is global, has really incited so many concerns, so much antagonism, and so many of us have been isolated from one another for so long, and we have by default just been interacting, communicating, doing business with devices, and unable to have those kinds of human interactions. And it's compounded by the fact that these social media algorithms, because so many of us these days are getting our information from social media, they are designed to even push us even further and further apart. So if you and I have different political leanings, right, these algorithms they're collecting this data on us, and we are literally receiving different information from each other that continues to push us further and further. So many people are getting information from YouTube these days. And if they put something that may seem conspiratorial, right, if they input it into that YouTube algorithm, immediately their feed populates with like information. And a lot of it is very well produced. And if we're no longer getting our news and information from bona fide news sources, we become vulnerable to believing that what we are receiving by way of these algorithms is truth and is fact. And the information I'm getting is completely different from the information that someone who espouses different views is getting. And so we're existing in these bubbles, right? Where I follow people who espouse the same views as I do. And you're doing the same. And that isolates me from knowing about what people who may think differently than I do think. And I think there's a real danger to that. And again, as I said, at the end of the day, we all want the same things. And once we do have that opportunity to engage each other, to speak to one another, human to human, look each other in the eyes, I think we realize that irrespective of our political leanings or this sort of set of values that we may have come to espouse, we all do want the same things, and that these, life and or death issues are really, they're the same for all of us. We all fear those things, right? In different ways. We both value and we fear these things. But once we can get to a point where we recognize our shared humanity, it becomes a lot easier to engage people who are different from us, because there's a recognition that I may be as afraid as you are. I am as protective of my own family and everything that I've worked so hard to achieve as you are, again, irrespective of those things that may have, these days intentionally pushed us apart.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you talked about sort of the opposites happening. COVID-19 really drove fear of mortality, but it also drove people to want to be more healthy as well. And so, it's interesting you brought that up, because we also found a study that about 30% of the people who were searching for life insurance was really because of the fear of COVID. So it sort of really had a tailwind within our industry. So thank you for sharing. One of the things I was thinking about too was about space and how people share stories with you, because you mentioned a lot of different kinds of conversations and situations that you're a part of. And one of the things I'd love to share with our audience too is what's sort of that method you use to build trust, and maybe it's slowly or quickly, and creating that connection, but also what are the types of interpersonal skills that are needed to do that, because a lot of it is to your point about that trust and communication. So could you give us a little bit of insights on your experience and maybe some advice?
It's a great question. And I think that I have to bring up my upbringing a little bit, because I do think that has had an impact on how I interact with people. I grew up in a community that was not very diverse. We didn't have a lot of money. My parents divorced when I was 7. And at that impressionable age, when you're growing up, you just don't want to be different. I had a lot of friends. I was a fairly popular kid, but I was constantly reminded that I looked different, that the food that my family ate was different. I never wanted to invite people over to my house because there was just like this strong Chinese food odor that just kind of penetrated everything, including including your clothes. I was teased pretty relentlessly. It wasn't malicious, but again, when you're a young kid, especially if you look different from everyone around you, you just don't want to produce any reminders of your differences. And that kind of identity conflict that I grew up with, I never felt totally American because I didn't look like the stereotypical image of what an American I thought was supposed to look like, nor did I know anything about what it was like to be Chinese from China, even though that's my ancestral background, because I was an American. I was born and bred in Sacramento, California. But nevertheless, that feeling of kind of existing on the periphery, of not really belonging because I looked different from everyone else. I had a different sort of cultural background, cultural practices than the people in my immediate surroundings. I think that really propelled me to want to tell stories or try and communicate stories of others who might feel similarly. And so over the years, I think that I've gotten fairly decent at communicating and telling stories in a way that is respectful, in a way I think that really allows people to feel something different than they might otherwise feel if they weren't given the opportunity to really get to know someone. I mean, it's so interesting that I grew up feeling very conflicted about my identity and never feeling entirely American, yet I would go on to front these shows that are uniquely about the American experience. My show, This Is Life, explores American subcultures or issues that are unique to America. The show that I did before this, Our America, did similar things. And so it really is interesting to me that as a young Asian American who felt that conflict of identity, that I would go on to do these shows. But I, it's always been so important to me when I immerse myself among different communities or people whose lives are very different from me, that I try to do so. I try to sort of park my judgment aside, and we all have opinions and judgments based on what we have sort of grown up believing about people. But I try to park that judgment aside, and I just try to listen. I also give people my cell phone number. Most people I've interviewed throughout my 30 some plus career has my cell phone number, because in so many cases, people have shared with me stories from their heart that they may have been repressing for decades. In some cases, they've shared stories with me that they haven't even shared with their closest friends or family members. And so I feel that responsibility to tell their stories as responsibly as possible. And I'm not the kind of reporter that will swoop in, get someone's story and then be gone never to be found again. I want people to know because they've shared something so deeply personal to me. And in so many cases, I share things about my life with the people that I'm engaging with, that we share this bond, again, irrespective of what in some cases this person may have even done, which includes crimes, right? Because my objective isn't to judge this person. My objective is just to try and understand what may have compelled someone to do something or think a certain way.
Mhm.
And I do think that that has allowed me to have relationships and to be able to tell stories in a way that is different. And I do think that there's a lesson that can be learned that we can apply to life. I'm sure that we all go through our days interacting with similar people. Sometimes we interact with people who are different, but we don't really take the time to understand one each other, really get to know each other. There may be people you've interacted with your whole life, but you may not know where they live or what their kids' names are, right? And once you take that time to kind of get to know people at a deeper level, it's astounding what you learn about yourself. And through my travels and through these opportunities to really engage, I really believe that I not only have become a smarter person, I've become a better person as a result. Now, that doesn't mean that I fall into the rabbit hole because I'm human, because I follow, again, people who espouse the same things that I do. It's a natural response to become reactive based on the things that are happening in the world and the conversations that are being had. But again, once I get that chance to interact with people human to human, I think you remove those walls, and you can get to a much deeper understanding of our shared humanity that way.
I think that's wonderful. And as I was researching you, I learned who inspired you to join your profession, but just equally how inspiring you are going to be and are to many people wanting to join this profession and drawing out people's voices as well. Just hopefully I'm right. I think I know in my head, but who inspired you to join your profession before I pass it on to Dan?
Well, as a young person and whose parents were divorced when I was 7, the television was always on in my home. I considered it my favorite babysitter. And I used to have these fantasies of somehow working in television, because I thought if I can work in TV, I might one day be able to have a better life. I used to have these fantasies of being part of the Brady Bunch family or Fantasy Island, but no one on those shows looked remotely like me. The only person who bore a resemblance to me was Connie Chung, who had this sort of national stage in which to do her work. And if you ask any Asian American journalists of my generation who inspired them, I would venture to guess that every one of us would cite Connie as our inspiration, because she allowed us to know what was possible. And so that notion that representation matters, seeing yourself reflected in someone else, in an industry that you may have thought impenetrable, really, for me, gave me the confidence and the courage to believe that it could be possible to pursue this kind of work.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Over to you, Dan.
Lisa, I want to go 2 lines deeper on some of the things you said. And for reference, I saw myself as part of the Seaver family on Growing Pains. Later in life, I was hoping to be part of the Cheers family, but I just, that didn't work out too well. But
haven't we all, Dan? I think I am part of the Cheers family.
Listen, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. We'll make our own Cheers family. So, but I mean, this is the insurance profession has a lot of connection to what you said, and you talked earlier about living in your sort of your own echo chamber, and then people growing further apart. Obviously, the insurance space has had to adjust and be virtual. But some of the things you've covered in your career, and you could tell I have a dry sense of humor. I didn't mean to make light of it, but most Americans don't even have any understanding, background, depth about some of the issues you tackled. or even realize like how you had to change sort of your character or go into character to penetrate these communities. You've had to have, I mean, you've had a lot of great impact and on change, but you've had a lot of really, really hard conversations. And you reference, your upbringing. You've had a lot of conversations with people who don't look like you, and you've still had to impact change. So without giving away the sort of the secret sauce of an investigative journalist, I mean, how do you have those hard conversations? I mean, and of course, my follow-up question is going to be, please give me some examples, right? Because this is pretty much a pale, male, stale profession. And we want to change that. But having hard conversations about life and death with candidly marketing people who don't look like you is very difficult for people who just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So hard conversations, examples, how are you doing it?
I think that people are smart, right? And they have a sixth sense about whether something seems transactional, and whether someone really does seem to be authentic and wanting to listen. And look, I don't want to delude myself into believing that I have this special gift, but I always have been someone who likes to think of myself as a sponge, and I really do want to know more about people that I'm interacting with. And when you do have that opportunity to hear someone out, it changes your perspective. And as crazy as it sounds, that idea of like changing my own perspective, that kind of excites me, right? Because I'm learning something new about my fellow humans, and it pushes me to want to continue that practice, right? I had this really special experience in downtown Los Angeles at a charter school once. It was a public charter school that consisted of mostly minority kids who'd gone through a lot. I would say that given the community where this school is located, these kids have seen things that kids probably shouldn't have ever had to see. And freshman year, they obligate every student to write an essay. They say, write an essay about something that you're going through right now that's really hard, okay, that you might want people to know about you. So the students write the essay, and then they put all the essays together in a book, and they obligate the entire freshman class to read the book. And so what happens after that exercise? The kids have a better understanding of each other about their depth. When I think back on my high school life, I went through 4 years just like having this impression that this person had the perfect life, or this person had the perfect family. And then later on, many years after I engaged them, I find out that in actuality, the person who I thought had a perfect family, the parents had this unfaithful relationship. One of the young men that I thought, he was actually like the stud in school, but never invited anyone to his home, is because he was so embarrassed his father was gay. And again, like these are the kinds of things that I wish there were exercises that I wish we could all kind of engage in, so that you kind of remove that level of surface, right? And you go deeper. And I think that, if I can cite any kind of secret sauce in this, it would be just the willingness to listen, and not seem to be transactional. And really, I think sharing a little bit about yourself, that goes a long way, because we are part of this culture, particularly now when we're not even interacting with humans anymore. We're just like, we're swiping, like though that even if how we find dates, right?
Yeah.
Is we're swiping, and that human connection is increasingly becoming lost. We don't even go to the grocery store in some cases to buy groceries. We can get them by device. And so we have to proactively make an effort to try to engage. And it's really astounding how much you learn as a person, but how much people really appreciate just having that sounding board or having that person who really just seems willing to listen.
Well, we all have perfect lives on Facebook nowadays. So we're back to, creating the image, right? Can I go a little bit further on that? I mean, you've interacted with so many different cultures. What is there another sort of aha moment when you went into the interview and you sort of had a situation that changed your perspective when you came out of it? I mean, what you just shared about the book that's a phenomenal idea. I wish more high schools would consider that,
Yeah.
right? Especially, especially since more high schools are coming from everywhere now.
Well,
But what about you, like sort of the aha moment where you prepped and planned and you went into that interview and you knew this culture and you were learning this culture, but yet in the middle of an interview like now, you get the, wow, makes you stop and pivot.
well, I'm not going to get political here, but
Sure.
I'll cite an example from something that we are dealing with right now, right? Um, we know we have a gun violence problem in this country. We know that, right? There are lots of people who believe that it's a human problem. It's not a gun problem because it's humans who pull the trigger and not the guns who actually do so. And it's so easy to get caught up in the headlines of it. For me, what I've tried to do is try to explore root causes, you know and when you do, when it comes to school shootings, for example, you find that 70% of school shooters are under the age of 18. So what's missing in these young men's lives? Why is it that there are so many young men who are in crisis, who feel the need to, one, possess these high impact firearms, right? But then to go on and indiscriminately want to cause harm. And I think that it's imperative for us to want to try to dig deeper into so many of these issues. Um, and 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 I think that when we do that, again, we attain a much deeper understanding of what we need, what young men need, and how young men, in so many cases, they aren't encouraged to feel, they aren't encouraged to be communicative about their feelings. When we look at suicide, I mean, suicide is among the top three causes of
Leading
death
causes of death. Yeah.
in young people, and it's particularly acute when it comes to boys. Now, girls, they ideate more about it, right? They might even make attempts at higher levels, but the boys somehow become more successful at going through with it. And why? Could it be because women are just more predisposed, or girls are more predisposed to talk about what they're going through than boys, because boys have been discouraged and for decades been told to man up? Like, could that play a role? I mean, again, it really requires, I think, rather than continuing to be reactive about these kinds of issues,
Right.
really trying to kind of dig deep and look at all of the forces that may be at play that may have led someone to perpetrate an attack. When we hear about these things, we're constantly hearing, well, there's a mental health issue there. There's a mental health issue. Okay, if that is the case, what are we doing as a country, right, to try and deal? Where are allocations? Where in our healthcare system do we allow for people to get real treatment, not just pharmaceutical drugs, but the real treatment that they need? And why aren't we treating mental illness like we treat debilitating physical illnesses? So for me, it's really trying to kind of like put all the pieces together and connect the dots before we become so reactive.
Jennifer, I have one more question I want to get to Lisa that selfishly I've been holding for you, and
Don't hold back. Go for it.
I mean, it almost tees up perfect to what you've been saying, Lisa. I mean, NAILBA is the independent space. It's a lot of family-owned general agencies that was started by the grandparents, passed down to the parents, and passed down to the children. They're very successful. They do a wonderful job closing the gap on the uninsured and underinsured. The challenge is it all looks the same, right? It's all started by the grandparents, the parents who look the same as the grandparents, and the children who are now the principals who look the same as the parents and the grandparents. But our space is challenged around building sort of a pipeline. That generational agency is starting to fade. And once again, to your reference about being reactive, we are being reactive to, you look at the bottom line, those numbers are slowly decreasing because of, well, we're not serving underserved communities. We're not recruiting people who look differently than us, so therefore we cannot recruit we cannot go into other markets. My question to you is just like, how do you change like the assumptions and the experience across the profession so we could attract new people to this profession? I mean, we can't be male, pale, stale forever, especially if we're going to serve underserved communities. You want to tackle that one?
Well, I mean, I can make an attempt, and I might have some suggestions. I mean, the reality is that the demographics of America are changing. It's just undeniable. And rather than being afraid of that, right? Maybe we can really embrace that. I mean, again, at the end of the day, we may look different from one another. We may have different cultural practices, but at the end of the day, right? We all deal with the same issues, and we want to be as protective of our families as anyone else does, right? And we all mourn the same, right? We all grieve the same, and by expanding those conversations, and I think that a lot can change with narrative and storytelling. When I had the conversation with my own family, and I had it with my husband, my mom, and my uncle, they started asking, like, why are you asking me these questions about life insurance? And I said, well, these are, we are living in unpredictable times, and it's incumbent upon us, I think, to have these conversations, because there's a big difference and between what life insurance can provide and what you can sort of dictate in a will and in a trust. And I don't know that people really understand that. And so allowing ourselves to really take off maybe that transactional hat and just think about ourselves as storytellers, inclusive storytellers, right? Who bleed the same way, again, who mourn the same way. I think that I think that would open the industry up, right, to people who may have never really understood. I mean, I think so many people, when they think insurance, they think about it as being something that's like compulsory, right? They don't really think about the benefits for the next generation, And I think that for so many of us who are parents, knowing how fragile mortality is, we want our kids to be able to thrive and not have to get entangled in so many of the things that they might get entangled with legally, or in the sort of tax space, right? We want to be able to provide our kids with as best a kind of footing as possible, and sharing those kinds of stories. They apply to everyone, right? No matter what your skin color is. And I think that even being a more inclusive environment and wanting to take the time within our own places of work to know each other's stories, to know each other's backgrounds, that frankly, I think even makes for a more productive workforce, because you feel seen by those who are fronting or heading the company. And I think right now more than ever, we are a culture that just wants to be seen. These days in parenting, for those who are who have parents of younger kids, I'm sure you've heard a lot lately about the importance of validating your children's feelings. You know, when they're having a temper tantrum, rather than, you know, the strict discipline, say to them, like, I see you're really, really frustrated right now. And that seems like such an elementary exercise, but to that kid who's in the midst of that tantrum, feeling like someone sees that perspective, right? And understands, like, it's really hard. I see that you're going through something really hard right now and you're having a difficult time kind of controlling those emotions. I mean, there's such profound lessons to be learned in those activities that we engage in with our own kids, seeing each other, seeing each other's humanity, seeing each other's struggles, seeing each other's grief, seeing each other's joy and triumphs, and validating those things, I think would take us a long way, right? In trying to sort of emerge from what seems like chaos right now. And I think that this period right now of consternation and of vitriol, we have to go through this, right? In order to get to a better place of tolerance and empathy and understanding. These are things that can be taught, but I think because we've sort of grown up in this system where, you know, everything is about achievement, everything is about consumption, rather than like what's really important and what we all have in common. Once we sort of get to that realization that our humanity is shared, right? That we have more in common with each other than we do differences, then I think we can get to a better place of understanding and communication. But we kind of have to get through this ugly period. But I think as human beings who want to see us in a better place, we personally have to take the first step. We can't wait for an industry to follow us. We have to make those moves and preemptively, right, open ourselves up to engagement, and learning those hard lessons so that we could get to a better, more equitable place.
Mhm.
Did
I
that
appreciate
make
no,
sense, Dan? I'm sorry that
that's spot on. I really appreciate you answering that question. And I love the fact that you brought up empathy, because obviously we're in a very corporate mindset in the insurance space, but there's no line item needed for empathy on any budget, right? So there's no excuse for not doing it. Before we end up at cheers, Jennifer, please take the mic away from me.
So Lisa, I'm always about like a few sort of takeaways as well, that we could maybe challenge ourselves, that also maybe our listeners could also be challenged with, since you have worked across a lot of different professions and countries and positive and very difficult situations, and bringing light through your storytelling, which is really phenomenal. But if you sort of had two things we could all walk away with to help build a more inclusive environment, whether it's within our own organizations, with our customers, with our colleagues, what would you sort of recommend as a good starting point?
I mean, I think as again, an elementary exercise, those people that you might interact with frequently, just taking the time to kind of get to know them a little bit better as an initial exercise, because I think you'll be surprised by what you learn. I mean, look, I think we all, and I certainly am victim to this as well. We harbor these preconceived ideas about one another. And again, we're being pushed by algorithms, like even further, like, you know, in opposite directions. But there have been so many occasions where I have seen someone maybe looking at me and immediately had this judgment. Oh, well, you know, here I am, this Asian woman walking into this, you know, Target with a mask on. I'm thinking, you know, like, I know people are looking at me and thinking like, you know, she brought COVID or whatever. And that person that I was harboring this judgment about, will say something like, I really loved your show about, or, you know, just something, or, you know, and I feel like an ass, quite honestly, because I went into it with my own sort of preconceived ideas, because again, like, and it's my own fault. But again, part of this is, you know, that there is this force right now in America and in the world, really, that's just pushing us into extremes. But it's indoctrinating us because humans are not being required to even think as much as they used to, because these things think for us.
Yeah.
Right. And so making a concerted effort, right,
Yes, I
to
agree.
to
Yeah.
remove that judgment from your consciousness. um it's a hard thing to do, it really is. And take the initiative to engage, even if it feels uncomfortable. I think you'll be astounded by what you learn about the other person, about the other community, but also about yourself.
Self-reflection. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Well, thank you. I think one of the, I just thought maybe what I would share today, Dan, do you want to add any more questions?
No, I'll keep Lisa here forever if I keep
I
going.
know, me
So,
too. I want to dig a, when we're not recording.
Well, I should thank you all, though, for giving me the impetus to talk about some really important things with my own family, and getting a chance to engage with you all, and you sharing your desire to want to see change, but also kind of open that door, which may be scary, right? Because things have been done a certain way for so long. But that willingness to want to engage really made an impact on me. And it actually made me feel more confident about having those hard conversations with my own family. So thank you for that.
Well, you are disarming in a very positive way, because in a way, for us to interview a journalist is not our natural go-to. So I think in a really positive way, you definitely help push at least me forward. I won't speak on Dan about definitely understanding storytelling in a way that can bring much more positive change. I wrote down a few words and then I'll hand it over to Dan to sort of wrap up for us. But I wrote down about getting to know each other. The root causes, I think, is really phenomenal. I think because we move so quickly, sometimes we don't really stop and sort of dig deep into understanding the root cause of a lot of issues we face. So that was very helpful. Also, what really stuck out to me outside of the listening piece was the transactional versus authentic. I think we live in a very transactional world in our profession as well, and just sort of a gentle reminder about the human side of it as well, about how this brought light to storytelling within your own family and how we can be much more impactful of creating sort of less awkward conversations. Just to quickly share, one of the things we're doing at Legal is, in general, is something around reverse mentoring, which we believe has been a really positive win-win so far, where we're empowering junior employees to really to sort of develop their confidence and leadership skills. And at the same time, when you mentioned about self-reflection, it's really allowing us to learn, because there's 5 generations in the workforce right now. When Dan talked about the multi-generational ownership, particularly with our independent agents, you can have 5 generations in one office. We have 5 generations in our office as well, but it helps us also learn so we can be more self-reflective as well. So that was something that we're trying to experiment with, to let voices rise and be more inclusive. So thank you, Lisa. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, Lisa, some great insight, right? I love how you kind of simplified from all of your travels, different cultures, you know, really sort of embracing that it does take a village for us to tackle these issues. And it only strengthens that, you know, NAILBA's position of reunifying the profession as part of FinSECA helps us close the gap on the uninsured and underinsured. And clearly empathy has to be front and center, whether we're in the insurance space or somewhere else. So Lisa, I really want to thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm sorry I missed you at Cheers or as part of the Seaver family with Growing Pains. Jennifer, you guys and LGA, you guys are leaders in our space. You continue to support independent distribution. We can't ask for better partners. So just thank you for your continued support. And obviously, I don't have to shout Legal in General America too loud because the broker general agencies know you guys extremely well. So it's really much appreciated. And I want to thank the attendees for, taking some time, hearing a different conversation, getting some insight. And I challenge you to go back to your agency, to your home office, to your virtual office, and start applying it. Thank you for being part of NAILBA's Summer Symposium.
Thank you.